Former Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio is mounting a legal challenge as he works to overturn his conviction in light of his pardon by President Trump. Attorneys for Arpaio asked a U.S. District Court judge to vacate.
Oh, wait. Why is he going to a judge? Because he actually was above the law. He's above the law. Why is he going to judges? Because there were judges that were actually in the process of adjudicating his fate. So why is he going back to a judge?
He wants to vacate his criminal contempt.
Because if he doesn't like what the judge says, you've got a president who loves his thuggish behavior, who will just throw out whatever the judge does.
One of Arpaio's lawyers told a local paper that Arpaio will appeal if the judge does not vacate all decisions in the case. Meanwhile, President Trump defended his decision to pardon Arpaio on Friday night. I feel like he read a poem. Just as Hurricane Harvey made landfall in Texas. Take a listen.
A lot of people think it was the right thing to do, John, and actually in the middle of a hurricane, even though it was a Friday evening, I assumed the ratings would be far higher than they would be normally. You know, the hurricane was just starting, and I put it out that I had pardoned, as we say, Sheriff Joe. He's done a great job for the people of Arizona. He's very strong on borders, very strong on illegal immigration. He is loved in Arizona. I thought he was treated unbelievably unfairly when they came down with their big decision to go get him right before the election voting started.
Okay, he's so, first of all, so deeply offensive that you would use human suffering to push your ratings if you're president of the United States. But secondly, Mark Halperin, he's wrong on all those counts. He's not beloved in Arizona. You have the two Republican senators both condemning this pardon. He was voted out of office by people in his own county.
There's a lot of symbolism.
A lot of fake news there.
There's a lot of symbolism, too, not just the pardon, but the way the president talked about it yesterday. And Arizona, in the fall of next year, when we look at the midterms, look at some of the races there, Arizona is going to be one of the most important states in the country to determine how people are feeling about Donald Trump. He won the state against Hillary Clinton, but he's stirring things up there on both sides.
Heidi, I mean, Sheriff Arpaio, at this point, this feels like the beginning of many pardons that will be absolutely very hard to understand and possibly even, I think, really bad for the country at this point. Because I think he's going to pardon people who have done things with the Russian
Also, how difficult is it for Republicans on Capitol Hill to deal with things like this when even the Republican senators from that home state are offended by it?
What are people saying?
Well, of course, that is some of the speculation, is that this pardon was in part issued to set a precedent here. It's the first time in almost 30 years that we've seen a pardon, especially a controversial one like this, come this early in a president's term. So at a minimum, though, regardless of what happens with the Mueller investigation, you have to wonder what the message this is also sending to anyone down there, including federal agents, that the president is saying, you know what? Trumps the rule of law, my ideology. And when you are rounding up people and there are certain laws that you are supposed to abide about people's constitutional rights, etc., that my ideology is more important. And I think there's another message that we have to take away and listen to what Trump is telling us here. Just the way this came down, guys, with Trump teasing it at a political rally, with him potentially saying that he wants to also, or his people saying he wants to also go after DACA. Trump is telling us something here, and we should listen, and that is Bannon is gone. These guys like Sebastian Gorka are gone. This is Trump.
Right.
He did this in a very political way. He made this decision, and he's, like he said to us yesterday, the people who he cares about, his base, they loved it. When he said, Joe Arpaio, should I pardon him at the rally? They ate it up, and they were screaming and cheering. This is Trump, and he thinks that this was the right decision. He's sticking by it.
Coming up on Morning Joe, we're joined by the editor-in-chief of the Lawfare blog, Benjamin Wittes, who says there's already 3 different things Congress could look into when it comes to whether the president should be impeached.